When my neighbor slipped a note under my door telling me not to park in my own driveway, I laughed. I thought it was some kind of weird prank. But by 1 hour in the morning, I was standing at my window, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. What I saw outside changed everything. Before I get into it, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Harper. I'm 29 years old and I live in a small suburban neighborhood with my 6-year-old daughter, Ella. Life isn't easy. I work long shifts as a nurse, often coming home late at night completely drained. My world pretty much revolves around Ella, making sure she's safe, happy, and loved. That night, I'd just come back from a late shift at the hospital. Ella was asleep, in the back seat, her little head resting against the car window. She had been so tired after staying up waiting for me that I carried her inside, still in her unicorn pajamas. I remember tucking her into bed, brushing her hair back, and kissing her forehead. When I came back downstairs to grab the groceries from me car, I noticed a folded piece of paper wedged under my front door. It was strange because I don't usually get anything left like that. I picked it up thinking maybe it was a flyer or a delivery notice, but when I unfolded it, I froze. The note said, "Harper, don't park in your driveway tonight. Please, trust me." I stared at it, confused. It was signed by Mark, my neighbor. Mark Issa. Quiet, middle-aged man who lives next door. He mostly keeps to himself, never causes trouble, and honestly, we've only ever had small talk. That's why the note felt so out of character. I couldn't help but laugh nervously. It felt silly, like something out of a mystery movie. I even texted my mom about it. "Mom, you won't believe this. Mark just told me not to park in my own spot." "What is this? A prank?" she replied almost right away. "Maybe he's trying to hit on you." I rolled my eyes and tossed the note on the counter. It didn't feel serious at all. But just in case, I parked on the street that night, thinking it would make a funny story to tell later. At that moment, I had no idea how serious it really was. The note from Mark kept playing in my head. Even after, I parked my car on the street and locked up for the night. At first, I had brushed it off as a strange attempt at being friendly, maybe even an awkward joke. But as the hours passed, the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. Why would he say something so specific? Why tonight? It wasn't the kind of thing you tell someone unless there's a real reason. I lay in bed trying to sleep, but every creak of the house made me tense. The wind rattled the branches outside, and the shadows on my wall stretched and moved like they were alive. I glanced over at Ella, curled up in her blankets with her favorite stuffed bunny tucked under her arm. The sight of her always brought me comfort, but it also reminded me how much I had to lose. If there was even the smallest chance Mark's warning was serious, I couldn't take it lightly. Around midnight, I had finally drifted into a light sleep when a sound jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was just a garbage can tipping over, or maybe raccoon. But then I heard it again, a faint scraping sound like metal dragging against pavement. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I moved carefully, not wanting to wake Ella, and tiptoed toward the front window. Slowly, I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. What I saw made my stomach twist into knots. 2 figures were crouched near my driveway. At first, I couldn't make out what they were doing, but the way they moved was deliberate and steady. One of them had something in his hand that caught the light. It shimmered for a second, and that's when I realized it was a knife or a box cutter. My mouth went dry. They weren't just hanging around. They were working on something. I leaned closer, trying to see better without making a sound. My hands trembled as I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Then it hit me. They were cutting into my tires. My car was parked down the street, but if I had followed my usual routine and left it in the driveway, it would have been right under their hands at that moment. I felt my chest tighten as the weight of the note finally sank in. Mark hadn't been joking. Panic surged through me. I backed, away from the window, trying to stay quiet. My first instinct was to grab my phone and call 911, but a part of me hesitated. What if they heard me? What if they realized someone was watching them? The last thing I wanted was for them to know Ella and I were inside. Still, I couldn't just stand there. My fingers shook as I dialed the number and pressed the phone to my ear. When the dispatcher answered, I kept my voice as low as possible. "There are 2 men outside my house," I whispered. "They're messing with my driveway. Please send someone." The dispatcher asked Fordtails, her voice calm but urgent. It tried to explain, but my words came out rushed and broken. She reassured me that officers were on the way and told me to stay on the line. That small assurance helped, but the minutes dragged by like hours. I returned to the window, my knees almost giving out beneath me. The men were still there, moving with eerie calmness, like they had done this before. One of them reached into a bag and pulled out a small container. I squinted, my heart racing, and then I realized what it was. The man tilted the container and poured liquid across the driveway. The smell carried faintly through the air, sharp and unmistakable. Gasoline. I nearly dropped the phone. My whisper turned into a sharp gasp. They weren't just vandalizing. They were planning to set the car on fire. My hands clutched the curtain so tight I thought the fabric would rip. Images flooded my mind of flames spreading, the heat consuming everything. Ella trapped upstairs while I tried to get her out. I forced myself to breathe quietly, not wanting to give away my presence. The dispatcher asked me what was happening, and I whispered, "They're pouring gasoline. Please hurry." The fear was so strong it almost felt like it was choking me, but underneath it was a sudden burst of clarity. Mark had saved me from walking right into a trap. If I'd parked in my driveway, my car would be drenched in fuel, and one spark could have turned the entire night into a nightmare. As I stayed crouched by the window, watching these strangers prepare to do something unthinkable, every instinct in me screamed to protect Ella. My body was shaking. My palms were damp with sweat, but I stayed as still as I could. I wasn't going to let them know we were awake. That night, waiting for the flashing lights of the police to appear, I realized just how much danger we were in. And the worst part was knowing this was no random prank. Whoever those men were, they had a reason for targeting me. I stayed crouched by the window, my heart racing so fast it felt like it might give out. The smell of gasoline still lingered faintly in the air, and the image of those men moving calmly around my driveway wouldn't leave my mind. Every second felt like a gamble. I was holding the phone to my ear, whispering updates to the dispatcher, praying the sound of my voice wouldn't carry outside. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay calm and stay quiet. "Officers are on the way," she said. "They'll be there soon," but soon didn't feel soon enough. Mia's kept darting to the clock on the wall. Each minute dragged on like it was an hour, and every passing second Madame more certain that those men were just seconds away from lighting a match. I pulled myself away from the window for armament and tiptoed upstairs. My chest was tight as I checked on Ella. She was still curled up in her bed, her little hand resting on her bunny. She looked so peaceful, completely unaware of the danger outside. The sight made my throat tighten. I couldn't let anything happen to her. Not ever. I whispered to the dispatcher, "My daughter is upstairs. If they set the fire, I don't know if I can get her out in time." My voice cracked on the words. The dispatcher stayed calm, reassuring me again that help was close. She told me to prepare just in case, to gather essentials quietly and make sure I could get out quickly if I had to. That advice hit me like a wave of cold water. I needed to be ready. I couldn't just crouch in the dark, waiting for whatever happened next. I grabbed a backpack from Ella's closet and stuffed in a few things without making noise. Her favorite toy, a sweater, my phone charger, and my wallet. My hands were clumsy from the shaking, but I forced myself to focus. If we had to run, I wanted us. to be able to grab the bag and go. When I returned to the window, the men were still there. One of them was pacing nervously while the other knelt down, fiddling with something in his hands. My stomach twisted when I realized he was holding a lighter. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear and whispered, "One of them has a lighter. Please tell me they're almost here." The dispatcher's voice was steady, but I could hear the urgency now. "They're close. Stay hidden. Do not confront them." That last warning echoed in my mind. A part of me wanted to scream at them to stop, to bang on the window and make them run. But I knew that would only put Ella and me in even greater danger. They might panic and act even faster. They might even try to get inside the house. I forced myself to stay quiet, even though every nerve in my body screamed to act. I crouched there in the dark, gripping the curtain so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My whole body was trembling, but I kept my focus on one thing: protecting Ella. At one point, I thought about waking her up and sneaking out the back door. My mind raced through the possibility, but then I pictured us running through the yard, vulnerable with the men just a few feet away. If they saw us, I didn't know what they were capable of. That thought alone kept me frozen in place. Minutes dragged by. The man with the lighter flicked it open once, then snapped it shut like he waste-sting it. The tiny spark of flame made me whole body jolt. I whispered into the phone, barely holding back tears. "Please, they're going to do it. Please tell me the police are here." Then out of nowhere, I saw a movement farther down the street. Headlights turned the corner, moving fast. My chest filled with a surge of hope. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing brighter as they rushed toward us. Relief and fear crashed together inside me. Help was finally here. But it was also the moment everything would come to a head. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering. "They're here," I whispered into the phone. "The police are here." The dispatcher confirmed it, urging me to stay hidden. I crouched there, clutching the backpack and praying the men wouldn't do anything reckless before the officers reached them. That was the longest moment of my life, waiting for the flashing lights to reach the driveway, waiting to see if the men would panic and strike the lighter before they were caught. And just like that, the decision I made earlier to trust the note, to call for help instead of ignoring the warning, became the thin line between safety and disaster. The flashing red and blue lights finally spilled across the street, painting the houses in colors that made everything look unreal, like I'd stepped into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My breath caught in my throat as the police cruisers came to a screeching stop right in front of my house. The silence of the night shattered as car doors slammed and officers shouted commands. "Hands up! Drop it on the ground now!" The two men froze. For a split second, their bodies caught in the beam of the patrol car headlights. Then everything exploded into chaos. One of them bolted toward the side yard, trying to escape through the narrow path between the houses. The other clutched the lighter, his hand shaking as if he couldn't decide whether to fight, run, or strike the flame. My heart felt like it stopped in my chest. That single decision, whether he flicked his thumb and let that flame catch, could have changed my entire life in an instant. I pressed both hands against my mouth, tears welling in my eyes as I watched from the window. "Drop it now," one of the officers barked, his voice sharp and commanding. The man hesitated. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to do it. The lighter clicked open, the tiny spark glowing in the dark, but before the flame could catch, one of the officers tackled him hard to the ground. The lighter clattered across the driveway, landing harmlessly against the curb. My whole body sagged with relief, my knees nearly giving out. The other man didn't make it far. Officers sprinted after him, their flashlights bouncing in the dark. I could hear the sound of their heavy boots pounding the pavement, followed by shouting and the distinct metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut. It was over in less than a minute, but it felt like I had been holding my breath for hours. I pressed my forehead against the glass, my whole body trembling, whispering a thank you to God under my breath. I looked up the street, and saw a figure standing near the corner, watching all of this unfold. It was Mark, my neighbor. He stood with his arms crossed, his face tight with concern. But when the police had the men secured, he let out a visible breath. That was when I realized the truth. He'd been watching out for me all along. I slowly backed away from the window, grabbed the backpack I had packed for Ella, and headed upstairs. She was still sound asleep, completely unaware of the chaos happening just outside her window. I brushed her hair gently and whispered, "You're safe, baby. You're safe." By the time I went back downstairs, there was a knock at my door. My legs felt unsteady as I opened it, but the sight of the officer standing there gave me a wave of relief I can't even describe. "Ma'am, it's safe now," he said. "We've got them in custody. Do you want to come outside for a moment?" I nodded, still gripping the strap of the backpack like it was a lifeline. When I stepped outside, the night air hit me, cool and sharp. The smell of gasoline still clung to the driveway. But now it was mixed with the strong scent of rubber from the police tires. Flashing lights still bounced across the houses. Neighbors were peeking out of windows and doors. And officers moved quickly around the scene. And then I saw Mark again. He was speaking to one of the officers, his face pale but calm. When he noticed me, he walked over slowly like he wasn't sure how I would react. "Are you okay?" Hesked softly. I wanted to say something, but my throat was tight. Instead, nodded, blinking back tears. "How did you know?" Mark let out a heavy sigh. "I was walking my dog earlier tonight. I cut through the alley and overheard those guys talking. They mentioned your car, your driveway. I didn't want to scare you, but I couldn't let you park there. I wasn't sure if you'd take me seriously, but I hoped you would." I stared at him, my hands shaking. "You saved us," I whispered. Mark gave a small shake of his head. "I just did what anyone should do. I couldn't stand by and let it happen." The officers returned a few minutes later to give me details. They explained that the men had been planning to set my car on fire as some kind of revenge. At that moment, I remembered a patient I had treated at the hospital a few weeks earlier. He had been belligerent, angry that I wouldn't break protocol to get him something he wanted. He had cursed me out, even threatened me under his breath as security escorted him out. The officers believed these men were connected to him. The realization made my stomach drop. I had never thought that doing my job, following the rules, could put me and my daughter in danger like this. Standing there in the flashing lights, surrounded by neighbors whispering from their porches, I felt exposed, but also incredibly grateful. If it weren't for Mark's note, if it weren't for that small piece of paper slipped under my door, the night could have ended in flames. I looked at him again, standing there quietly, almost like he didn't want recognition. In that moment, I knew I could never look at him the same way again. He wasn't just the quiet man who kept to himself. He was the reason my daughter and I were safe. As the officers led the men away in handcuffs, the adrenaline finally began to drain from my body, leaving me exhausted. But deep inside, I felt a fierce sense of relief. The danger had passed, and we had survived the night. The next morning, the neighborhood looked calm again, as if nothing had happened. The flashing lights were gone. The police cars had rolled away, and most of the neighbors had returned to their usual routines. But for me, nothing felt normal. I stood at the window sipping coffee, staring at the dark stains left in my driveway, where the gasoline had soaked into the concrete. It was a reminder that the danger had been real, not some bad dream I could shake off. Inside, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen while Ella ate her cereal at Thedible, swinging her little legs under the chair. She was humming to herself, completely unaware of how close we had come to disaster. I couldn't stop looking at her, couldn't stop thinking about how different this morning could have been if Mark hadn't slipped me that note. If I had ignored it, if I had parked in the driveway like always, we might not be sitting here safe and whole. I kept the details from Ella. She was too young to understand what had almost happened. When she asked about the lights outside, I told her, "The police were helping someone last night, but everything is okay now." She nodded, satisfied with that answer, and went back to eating. I was grateful for her innocence. Later that day, the police came back to give me an update. They confirmed what they had suspected the night before. The men were connected to that angry patient I had treated at the hospital weeks earlier. They had been looking for a way to get back at me. The officers explained that setting fire to Tomi car wasn't just about damaging property. It could have spread to my house, to Ella's room upstairs, to everything I had built for us. Hearing that made my stomach turn. It also made me realize how thin the line between safety and disaster really is. After the officers left, I sat on the couch insolence, staring at the note Mark had given me. It was crumpled now from being in my pocket all night, but the words were still clear. "Don't park in your driveway tonight. Please trust me." I ran my fingers over the ink and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. That evening, I finally gathered the courage to walk next door and thank Mark properly. He was sitting on his porch, watering a row of plants he kept by the railing. He looked up when he saw me, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure if I would come over. "I don't even know what to say," I told him. "If it wasn't for you, I don't think Ella and I would be safe right now." Mark gave a small smile, but he shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what I'd want someone to do for me." I nodded, but I still felt the weight of what he had done. He didn't just warn me about some inconvenience. He gave me a chance to protect my daughter, to keep our lives intact. That kind of kindness is rare. That night, after putting Ella to bed, I lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. I realized how often we take ordinary things for granted. Our homes, our routines, our sense of safety. We assume that nothing bad will happen because it hasn't happened before. But in one night, that illusion can shatter. I also thought about trust. It's not easy to trust someone, especially when you don't know them well. When I read that note, my first instinct had been to laugh, to brush it off. But something made me listen, and that decision changed everything. Sometimes we get warnings in life that don't make sense in the moment, and we have a choice to ignore them or to act. I was lucky that I listened. The experience changed the way I see my neighborhood. It changed the way I see Mark. He may still be the quiet man who keeps to himself, but now I know he's also the kind of person who pays attention, who looks out for others even when it would be easier to stay silent. That makes him more than just a neighbor. He's someone I'll always be grateful for. As for me, I carry a new awareness. Danger can come when we least expect it, and life doesn't always give us time to prepare. But I also carry a new strength knowing that I was able to protect Ella and keep her safe. That's what matters most. When I tuck her in at night, now I linger a little longer. I brush her hair back, kiss her forehead, and remind myself that every single day with her is a gift. So, if there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this. Pay attention to the people around you. Sometimes the smallest gesture, the quietest warning can save a life. Mine was saved by a single piece of paper slipped under a door at just the right time.